Hey there, Raina.
Hi, Marcel.
How's it going, my friend?
Good, just editing newsletters. Are you excited for this?
I'm fine. Oh, always. I'll get people admitted here shortly. We're okay. Susan will be on in a little bit, and I could maybe use a little bit of help just admitting people if there are people trying to join while I'm in the middle of presenting.
Okay, I can do that for you.
That would be killer. Thank you.
Sure. I'm sitting outside, but I think my Wi-Fi will hold up.
Okay. Yeah, and Susan should be on in like 10, 15 minutes too. So it'll
Okay.
be it'll be short.
Probably if I go. I'm just sick of sitting inside.
I don't blame you. I've been inside all day. I feel cooped up.
Yeah, I can definitely help. Let me know when you want to start admitting people.
Okay. Yeah, I'll let everybody in the waiting room in right now. And yeah, we'll get things going.
All right, good luck.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Howdy,
we'll give folks a few more minutes here to log in. Hey, Tom.
All right, if there's a Q&A at the end, I do have a question.
Absolutely. Yes, there will be. All right, I'll give folks a few more minutes here. Howdy, Norm.
How you doing today?
Doing well. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. Seems like it's been a while.
What was that?
I said it's been a while.
It has been a while, especially since I've seen you in person.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe give folks another minute or so here. I think we had 30 or 40 people RSVP, so I think folks are still coming.
When's your next trip down the river?
You know, the Animus doesn't have quite enough water to go too far.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at maybe doing some other rivers later this fall.
Yeah.
I might jump on the Gates of Lodore trip, which I'm excited about.
Yeah. Unless we get a little rain or snow, it's
right.
There's not going to be any travel down the river.
Right. We've been a little dry. All right, one more minute and then I'll dive into it.
I might wait till 5:05 because I know some people are coming after work. I got some emails about that, just so you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can wait a couple more minutes. I'm in no rush.
If
you guys are joining us for the first time, and I'll get into this again when we get started. These are our kind of informal ways to connect with members or just folks that are interested in any of our programs. And so we cycle through all of our programs every month. And I run our Rivers program, so it's Rivers Month. So we'll be focusing on that this week. And I think next month we'll have Mike Eisenfeld with our energy and climate program. But yeah, we started doing these this year, and members reached out and said that they really appreciated them. We also, since we're all so used to Zoom these days, it's nice to connect like this and chat about what's going on. So again, thank you guys for joining. And even though it is informal, you can tell I'm taking it seriously because I'm wearing a collared shirt, which is very special these days. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but wearing a collared shirt for a Zoom meeting is not something I usually do.
I think
The real question, Marcel, is if you're wearing pants.
Now that I don't need to disclose, right? That's the magic of Zoom.
What this is.
San Juan Mountain Association. And this is the fellow that knows all about the Animas River.
Collared shirt and glass of wine and chicken parmesan here. So
Oh, nice.
this is my meeting attire.
You have upped me, Tom. I'm jealous.
Well, it is 7:05 here in the East Coast.
Good deal. Thanks for tuning in. All right, we're 5 after now. So to respectful of your time, I will get started. Again, as I said a little bit ago, this is San Juan Citizens Alliance monthly scoop that we've been doing every month since, I believe, April, where we kind of have different program managers and folks that run our different programs provide an update on what's going on. You can check in with our river programs this month. We also have energy and climate, lands and forest protection, and wildlife. That's Gary right there with the awesome rock art behind him. He's our wildlife manager. So yeah, we've been cycling through these. It's Rivers Month, like I said. So I am here. If you're unfamiliar with San Juan Citizens Alliance, or if this is your first time kind of tuning in with us, we're kind of your homegrown environmental nonprofit here in the San Juan. And our kind of mission statement is we protect clean air, pure water, healthy lands. We advocate for those things because we believe they're foundational to resilient communities, ecosystems, and economies in our region. So I program. I studied geology and geophysics at the University of Utah, worked as a hydrogeologist for the United States Geological Survey before I came on to run the Animas River program for San Juan Citizens Alliance as your Animas Riverkeeper in 2017. I'll get my screen share on here. There we go. Can everybody see that okay? Right. Let's see. Let me move some things around here for myself. That way I can see all of you still. Cool. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm your Animas Riverkeeper, and I say your Animas Riverkeeper because it's your Animas River. If you're unfamiliar with Riverkeepers, we're essentially dedicated water advocates. That's me right there. Does it look like me if I put my hands to the side? We're dedicated water body advocates that work full-time advocating for the health of individual watersheds. It's a movement that started in the United States on the Hudson River with a group of fishermen that were tackling industrial pollution to the Hudson. And since then, we've grown to over 350 riverkeepers all around the world on 6 continents. For our Riverkeeper program, we work in kind of 3 key areas in the watershed. That's water quality and watershed health, water management and policy, and then recreation. And if you were with us for the last Animas River Scoop that I did, we did all 3 of those pretty extensively with a longer presentation. For today, I'm going to keep it a lot more informal. So it won't be a long presentation. I want to leave a lot of room at the end for questions and discussion and just generally talking about things going on in the river, anything that you guys might have a question about. Let's see. I told myself I was going to keep it short. I do have 7 pages here. I'm going to touch on everything I wanted to touch on. Last time we highlighted things like the landmark mining reform that we helped pass in the state of Colorado in 2019. We talked about some of our recreation work, like the overnight group float that we do between here and Farmington, New Mexico. We also do a raft race for Farmington's Riverfest in the spring. So we talked about that last time. And then we also highlighted some of the work we're doing to place special protection on high quality tributaries to the Animas River, which we can provide a new update on that at the end if folks still have questions. But for today, like I said, I'm keeping it a little bit more informal. I'll give an update on what's going on at the top of the watershed, up at the Superfund site at the headwaters of the river, and then also at the bottom of the watershed, where we're working to wrap our heads around what's going on with E. coli bacteria in the river system. And then my room at the end for discussion. So So first, let's talk Superfund mine cleanup. I will scroll down here. This is our Animas River page at sanjuancitizens.org. If you're unfamiliar or unaware, new to the area, at the headwaters of the Animas surrounding Silverton, we have extensive mining contamination caused by around 150 years of mining activity. And all that mess, hundreds of individual sites, contribute a large amount of toxic metals to the river system. That problem was highlighted by the Gold King mine spill in 2015, August 2015. And EPA accidentally triggered the release of 3 million gallons of mine impacted water from the Gold King mine, carrying 540 tons of metals to the river. It's a big deal. Most of you were probably around for that, made international news, and really kind of highlighted the issue of toxic legacy mines we have up there. And a year after that a Gold King spill, a federal Superfund cleanup process was initiated. The designation of the Bonita Peak Mining District Superfund site, which is targeting the cleanup of 48 individual mines and a handful of other metal sources in the 3 main drainages around Silverton. And so I came on as Animas Riverkeeper right after that designation came into place in 2016. And we immediately dove into the details, attending meetings, providing technical comments to the EPA. We comments, some of you on the Zoom with us right now might have submitted comments to some of our calls to action. And we've been developing relationships with EPA scientists, other important stakeholders. And after a couple years of pushing for it, we worked with some of those important stakeholders and partners of ours to form an official community advisory group for the site. So here, this is bonitapeakcag.org. So essentially a community advisory group, or a CAG, which formed in 2019, operates as a platform for citizens of the watershed to engage receive updates, provide feedback to the EPA around goal setting or around how we want the cleanup to move forward, cleanup decisions, and ask tough questions of EPA too. It's a great place to kind of grill EPA or put our feet to the fire on issues that we think are important. We're super lucky in our watershed to have people who've been working on these metal issues at the headwaters of the river for decades, especially the Animas River Stakeholders Group, which was led by Peter Butler, Bill Simon, and Steve Fern. Peter Butler is actually now the chair of our Bonita Peak Community Advisory Group. So the CAG has a lot of knowledge and expertise. We've been working hard to move the process along and really try to focus EPA's attention on some of the worst polluting areas of the watershed. There's still a lot of work to do up there, but I think the CAG's been pretty successful so far. We provided input on goal setting. We've helped EPA fine tune some of their plans. For example, they're planning to build a repository for mine waste at the headwaters of the river there in Silverton, just north of Silverton. And we provided some feedback through the CAG that kind of fine-tuned what their overall plan was for that repository. Many members of the CAG are still pretty frustrated, myself included, with how slow-moving Superfund can be, right? As the federal government, it's clunky, it's bureaucratic, it can be frustratingly slow. In the right direction, I say, with important investigations and 3 main goals of improving water quality to meet standards, stabilizing sources of pollution, and then mitigating unplanned releases like the Gold King spill. And that kind of takes me well into the first thing that I wanted to mention today, which those of you who follow the news here in Durango might have seen. We had a bit of a burp, or the EPA is calling it a burp, at one of the sites at the headwaters of the river, at the Frisco Bagley site, actually. It was an unplanned release, which is one of the things that EPA is trying to avoid up there in their as I said, EPA called it a burp, and probably the first thing to know is these are not uncommon, right? Mine sites with a tunnel or an adit that is open can fill up with water, groundwater when it rains, seeps into the mine, fills up, and it can transport metals out of the portal. Completely normal for up there, happens all the time. Water can get backed up on these mine sites for all kinds of different reasons too. Maybe it's the water is full of sediment and creates its own kind of earthen dam within the mine that backs up water and then breaks and releases water in kind of a pulse. In the winter, we've seen things like ice build up at some of these mine sites. And the ice can hold back water, and then when that breaks or melts, it can release water and metals all at once. And some of these sites, especially the ones that are not managed at all, can have collapses inside. So maybe the portal collapses and water backs up behind, pressure builds until it releases. These are all things that EPA is trying to avoid with a lot of their investigation. to give you guys some context and to kind of show off something that I believe I showed at the last scoop, this is a map I've been working on that I find to be super valuable. It's a great resource. You can also find this on our Animas River page at sanjuancitizens.org. If you scroll down, this is the Bonita Peak Superfund Riverkeeper map. So we have here all of the individual mines listing. What's handy is you can click in and it's got information about the site. Right now, all of these individual sites just have information that the EPA used when they designated the site. So it's a really great way to kind of zoom in and zoom out, look at where all the mine sites are. And as you can see here, it looks extensive, right? There's a lot of different mines along all these different drainages. And this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as what's up there, right? So the Superfund listing has 48 individual mine sites and a handful of other source areas of metals. But there are hundreds of. This is what EPA is focusing on. It's not the only mines that are contributing to pollution there. To zoom in a little bit further, so when you click from this page, you can click on this and it takes you to a bigger version of the map. Zoom in, you can also search for sites, right? So Frisco within the news recently, Frisco Bagley Tunnel, you zoom right to it. You can see exactly what it looks like, right? You can read about what the actual entails, how many mine dumps they have, what metals there are there that they are most concerned about. There's a good chance that this is where the burp came from, right? So you can see the water right here, kind of going over this pile, next to this pile, entering into the West Fork of the Animas, which would then drain down past Animas Forks, and then further down towards Silverton and the rest of the Animas. So this map's super handy. I get a lot of use out of it. Feel free to go to Animas River page on our sanjuancitizens.org website. You can access this. We also have plans in the future to update this map so that you can see kind of how the EPA is progressing in their cleanup of the sites up there by clicking into individual sites where they're doing work, right? So yeah, super useful. It kind of started as a way for me to familiarize myself with the mine sites. And then our members and other partners of ours have gotten a lot of use out of this. So wanted to highlight that for all of you. Besides this kind of burp at the back, which we're paying close attention to, I do have some messages out to EPA today asking for an update. I know that they're collecting water quality samples to see exactly how much metal contamination we might be seeing from this burp or this release of mine water from the Frisco Bagley. But we will also be having a community advisory group meeting next week, where if we don't hear from EPA before then, we'll definitely hear and those things are open to the public, which I'll get to in a little bit here. I can show you guys how to sign up for our emails, or you can always contact me and I can connect you with the Zoom link, and you can always log in every month when we talk to the EPA on what's going on there. Other kind of updates from the EPA that happened recently. So they've been busy up there with summer field work. One of the big ones is at the Gold King site, which is the famous one, right? So again, type in Gold King into our handy map here. You can zoom in. This is where all of the drama happened a couple years ago. So at this there in the summer, which has been interesting, they're drilling a long, what's called a borehole parallel to the Gold King mine tunnel here. And they're doing that to try to understand the geology of the site better, right? So they're drilling a hole parallel to the mine portal. They're taking out what's called a core, so a core of rock, and geologists can study that core and better understand the composition of the rock, right? So how strong is it? Is it fractured? And they're really trying to understand that because they want to understand about rockfall at the existing portal. They want to develop a way to stabilize or determine if they need to better stabilize the portal. And they're really doing this because they're interested in potentially bulkheading this site. So the Gold King mine level 7 and currently that could be a potential solution in the future, right? Bulkheads are essentially engineered concrete plugs that plug up the water. They have a valve on them so water can be controlled and released in manageable ways and then treated. So that's been the big work for them up there. It's super expensive to do drilling like this, but I would say necessary. You need to know how strong the rock is. And so that's a project that they are working on this summer. I think is completed by now, and we'll hear more about that from the EPA next week. Another important site is the Bandora, which is another site that's been on my radar for a while because it also is draining. It has water backed up in it. This is it right here. This is along the South Fork of Milk Creek, so the other side of the watershed. What they're doing here, because we know that there's water backed up and that the water is higher than the elevation of the portal, EPA really wants to understand what's going on here. There is, of course, the South Fork Mineral Creek campground just below here too, so there's a human health risk if they don't better understand kind of what the water is doing here. So what they're doing is they're planning to drill a monitoring wall behind into the mine workings to better understand the water conditions. Again, another super important step before they start mucking about something that they would have benefited from, for example, at the Gold King before they released all of that toxic water. So that's there this year. I know that they've been doing a little bit of work there. I don't think that the monitoring well is in place yet, but again, we'll hear from EPA next week as we do every month, and we will figure out what's going on. Some other important work up at the Superfund site. Let me zoom out here for everybody. Another handy thing with this map, since it is made on Google Maps, you can get satellite imagery, which is interesting. Just click over like classic Google Maps, which can help just kind of find where you are first. But one of the other important things that EPA is doing this year and are planning to kind of zero in on are better understanding water quality along this reach of the river. So this is Eureka up towards Animas Forks. So Silverton further down this way. If you try up here, it's gorgeous. It's a really pretty area. But unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of metals coming into the river system somewhere along this reach. They're especially interested in what are called the Eureka Fluvial tailings, which are right here. And so if we go back to our satellite view, you can see them. So all of these mine tailings, it's a mess. And it will be hard to develop ways to mitigate a problem this kind of expansive, right? This isn't a single draining source. This is potentially mine tailings spread out over a large geography. Might be hard to manage, but we need metals are coming in this reach. So they're planning to pay kind of special attention to this reach of the river. They're also looking further downstream. Here are the Kitty Mac tailings, also another important site. They're looking at Howardsville. You can see that there. Lots of mine waste here. And we're seeing pulses of metals enter the river system. The critical area that they're investigating through collaboration with Sunnyside Gold Corporation is down here, which if you've been up to Silverton, you've probably seen these, the giant molehills just north of town. So right here is another really important area for them to be investigating. We're seeing large increases of metals, especially through this reach. And those are the only mine sites right there. So they're paying close attention. Sunnyside Gold has been good about some of the data collection that they've been doing around better understanding if some of these mine piles are contributing metals to the river here. The other important thing that I'll highlight here, which we talked about during the last scoop, is that EPA is building a new mine waste repository. Super important for consolidating waste. They are mucking out places around it. They need somewhere to put all the waste. It's expensive to truck it out of the basin. It can also be dangerous. So they've been looking for a place to put that, and they've settled on right here. They're going to add waste on top of this waste pile. This is tailings pond number 4. So the new repository is going to go in up top here. I've submitted some comments with some concerns since we don't understand where the metals are coming from yet. Introducing new metals to the system, I have some concerns about. EPA has been good about addressing a lot of those. They are planning to kind of repository, which they'll start building in 2022, hopefully completed in 2022, while also still monitoring for metals in the river and better understanding where existing contamination is coming from. So that's another important area that I would keep an eye on. And again, you can ask about all these areas at any of the Bonita Peak CAG meetings, which happen monthly, the 4th Thursday of every month. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention that's super important that the CAG has been doing, we also talked about this during the last scoop, is the CAG's not just providing feedback, we're being a little bit more proactive, which I really appreciate about the group that we have. There are 15 of us with a lot of water quality experience, folks in public health, folks in agriculture, mining, We're collecting water quality samples to hopefully help the EPA with their goal setting, with their decision making up there. So we're collecting samples further downstream in the canyon. We have a site just below Elk Creek, which is the first major tributary to the river. In fact, I will just type that in here. The other handy thing but being Google Maps. If it wants to work for me, there it is. Oh, no, that's not it. There we go. So we have a sampling site just below Elk Creek here. We collect samples monthly, the CAG has. So that's the first major tributary in the river. And then we are also collecting samples further downstream at Cascade. Inflow, outflow. Cascade Creek. Cool. So we're also collecting samples just downstream of where Cascade Creek enters the river here, essentially to help EPA understand if what they're doing up in Silverton is working, right? We were pretty alarmed to learn that EPA was not collecting regular samples downstream of Silverton, which to the CAG, we were kind of scratching our heads. We're not going to understand if we're making a difference up there, if what they're doing water quality downstream, taking samples. So the CAG's collecting samples now for a little over a year. Again, once a month, even through the winter. We have folks that have skied down to Elk Creek to get samples. The train's also been really good to us rides up into Cascade to collect samples. And we've learned a lot. For example, we've learned that below Elk Creek, table value standards, so the standards that we use to decide if the water quality is good enough for fish or for drinking water or for any other uses, are not met for chronic aluminum. They're not met for iron, for chronic and zinc, cadmium, and pH is also high at that point in the river system. And so looking at the water quality data that we've collected at that location and doing some calculations, we've come up with about 150 pounds per day of zinc need to be removed from the system up around Silverton in order to meet water quality standards downstream. And so that, we hope, is really going to be helpful for the EPA to better understand how many metals they need to remove from the system just to meet water quality standards. And so that's one way that we see this being really valuable. Further downstream, since we do have other tributaries to the river, further down between Elk Creek and Cascade, things get diluted a little bit more. And we see that further downstream, we have issues with aluminum, with iron, and with zinc. And at that location, if we want water quality standards to be met further downstream, we need about 120 pounds per day of zinc to be removed from the system. Super important information that the CAG is really impressing is important to the EPA. For context, for example, one of the other big mine sites up around Silverton that's contributing metals is the Red and Bonita. And last I looked at the water quality data that the EPA did from that draining mine, the Red and Bonita contributes about 50 pounds per day on average. So that's a major site right there. And one of the things that CAG has been doing is really kind of pushing the EPA to focus on the worst sources of pollution to try to meet some of these water quality standards further downstream. So highlighting for them that we think we need about 120 to 150 pounds per day reduction, and then reminding them of these sites where we have per day coming in, we are hopefully going to help them prioritize their so super important. And yeah, that's about all I had for the Superfund site. Again, this is an informal discussion. I want to leave plenty of room at the end. So I am going to zoom us out of here and talk about something else at the lower end of the watershed, which is E. coli. Some of you may have seen this, this article that Jonathan Romeo with the Durango Telegraph put out recently, talking about bacteria pollution in the watershed. It's been a problem everywhere I've studied rivers all around the world. South America, the American Southeast, where I work for the USGS, and the San Juan Basin is no different, where we've seen bacteria impairments for decades, right? And it's a combination of ailing infrastructure, practices with livestock, for example, can contribute bacteria to the river. These systems can contribute bacteria to the river. We have a lot of those in our neck of the woods. It's been on our radar and the radar of the Mexico Environmental Department and the San Juan Watershed Group, who I work with down in Farmington, particularly concerning the animus, the San Juan and other rivers, which have been listed as impaired for bacteria for about a decade now. In 2013 and 2014, before I came on as a Riverkeeper, the San Juan Watershed Group partnered with the New Mexico Surface Water Quality Bureau, and they did what's called a microbial source tracking study which was looking for bacteria. And through all of their sampling, alarmingly, they found that 40% of all the water samples they were taking had E. coli levels that exceeded what's called the single sample standard for primary contact. What that means is we were finding in each water quality sample, or half of them, that there was enough E. coli bacteria to make it unsafe to be swimming in the river. That was concerning. That was a big wake-up call. And that by itself would be concerning if half of our samples are E. coli. But we also found that 94% of those samples were from human sources. So it's not just cows, it's not just horses or elk or other wildlife contributing or bacteria to the river. We have a serious issue with human sewage making its way to the waterway. We need to understand that, right? That is super concerning. It's alarming, especially since we enjoy recreation. That study back in 2013, 2014 also revealed that the main stem of the San Juan River is especially bad between Farmington and Hogback. We have pulses of bacteria coming in there that are just way, way too high. We need to better understand it. So and this article gets into it. I will drop a link to this article in the chat so that you guys can read it if you haven't seen it. But we're working with the San Juan Watershed group. I'm on their steering committee to do water quality sampling down there, right? This is my favorite thing. We're collecting data to try to better understand the problem. So we're kind of taking what we learned from the 2014 study. Now in 2021, we're continuing to ask the next important questions, right? Which is, where is that poop coming from? And what can we do about it? So right now we're sampling for that bacteria twice a month. We just got started near the end of this summer by both raft and vehicle. And we also have volunteer opportunities for that sampling. I'll provide a link to that if folks want to head down to Farmington to do some of the sampling with us. It's a fun experience. You get to learn about river ecology, watershed science, and get trained up in kind of on the ground water quality sampling, which is fun. Again, I will drop a link to that in the chat. Outside of that same, also trying to be proactive about it, right? We know we have a problem. We're trying to better understand the nature of that problem, but we're trying to keep it from getting worse too. So the last couple of years, I've been working with the San Juan Watershed Group and some of our partners and the state of New Mexico on doing simple things, right? So we formed what we call a septic subcommittee of the Watershed Group, which is a hilarious name for a committee in general, the poop. But we've implemented some easy things like outreach campaigns, right? Replacing flyers at recreational areas, RV parks. We're working with the state of New Mexico to hopefully host a training for septic inspectors in Farmington, hopefully later this fall or early winter. We're putting together a list of resources for homeowners down in Farmington, so they can understand things like septic maintenance, what they need to be doing every year, where they can access resources to help them do that. So we're doing what we can to kind of try to zero in on where the worst sources of the pollution are, but also try to keep it from getting worse if we can, which is super, super important, we think. Yeah. So I wanted to just touch on those two things, and I wanted to leave about a half hour for us to ask more questions about those or any other issues that we have across the Animas watershed. I'll be dropping links in the chat on all of these things. There'll be a link for the Bonita Peak Community Advisory Group, one for the Superfund map that I was showing you guys where you can zoom into the individual mine sites, a link to the Watershed Group in a coli article, and a link to a volunteer for bacteria sampling. So I'll drop those all in the chat. Also want to highlight a few other really cool things that are happening in the watershed. One of the ethnographic study that was completed earlier this year, again, related to the Bonita Peak Mining District site, but it was really a chance for the Utes to better understand and to characterize and to map out their ethnographic resources and their cultural resources, how those have been impacted by mining over the years, how they were specifically impacted by the Gold King spill. This is a fascinating study, you guys. I've not been able to read the whole thing yet, but it's got a lot of good information in there about the cultural resources that surround us in the San Juan Basin, especially in the Animas Basin. So I will link to this study. And then finally, before we get into informal discussion and to do this, there are two events coming up that I want to highlight. Fort Lewis College and the Southwestern Water Conservation District are hosting a seminar coming up next Tuesday. It's called Water Connection. looking at adaptation strategies for forests and desert landscapes. And they're going to be talking about the connection between forest health and water systems, which is really important. So I would encourage you to check this out. I'll drop a link to that as well. Lots of links in the chat coming at you. And then the other exciting thing I wanted to mention in Farmington, beginning on the 29th, is the Outdoor Economics Conference. Farmington area especially has been looking at expanding their recreational opportunities and highlighting what they have as far as rivers and mountain biking and everything else. So they're hosting their economic conference on September 29th. I'm helping them put on the Wild and Scenic Film Festival as part of that kind of kickoff party. So if you're interested in that, I'll drop a link in the chat too, while we kind of feature questions. So yeah, with that, I will open it up for questions. Sorry if I went fast, I want to leave time for us. And I'll stop sharing my screen so you can see me.
I have a question, Marcel.
Yeah, Tom.
So you can see me. Is it okay if I put in the chat my announcement for Acid Mine Nation Day?
Sure.
September 26th at the the Abbey Theater. I mean, Anima City Theater in Durango. All afternoon, episode 1 at 1 o'clock, 2 at 2 o'clock, and so forth. I'll attach an image that was an ad in Navajo Times. And another question is if I could also send a link to all 5 episodes in case people can't make or don't want to make because of COVID, a theater experience on Sunday, September 26th. They can see all those episodes there.
Sure, yeah. Please drop those links in the chat.
Okay, and then I have a comment. Thank you for explaining what the CAG is, and that CAG is now starting to hold EPA's feet to the fire. Episode 5 is Superfund the right answer? And when I finished that, I thought I was done, but I had much more to say. And so I'm editing episode 6, and it talks about accountability. And what you were saying about not having data downstream to compare with if they did projects upstream, there's no data downstream to determine whether what they did upstream had any effect on water quality downstream. So I'm very happy to hear that things are moving in that direction. That's good. But just so you know, episode 6 is going to be a little harsh on a few EPA projects because they really didn't take into effect or didn't listen to Peter Butler when a couple of years ago when they were talking about the IROD, the interim record of decision on the 26 quick fix projects. And so I'm really happy that things are moving in that direction now. I've been told to have patience, and maybe in January, maybe more, dare I say, collaboration might evolve, and things might get stronger as we go forward. Anyway, I will put that stuff in the chat, and I do appreciate your work on the CAG and explaining to these 20 folks what that was all about and what the challenges were there. So thank you.
Absolutely, thanks, Tom. Yeah, and I'd say very generally with the Superfund process, right? They're slow moving. They've been frustrating for people, I think, all across the country. I do feel that we're in a good direction. I think that we're making headway with the CAG. It's good that we got the CAG set up. We have a lot of knowledgeable folks there. Peter Butler, chief among them. So I think we're in a good spot. We've not seen any water quality improvements yet, which is frustrating, right? We've had Superfund for 5 years now, over 5 years. No, 5 years. So it's frustrating, but they are moving in the right direction. I can also sympathize with some of their scientists, right? You need to better understand the problem before you can address some of these things. But yeah, moving in the right direction. So I wanted to see, it looks like there were some folks asking questions that I wanted to make sure that I got to in the chat. So David Wegner asks, there any monitoring of the Howardsville mine tailing site to determine if there are metals continuing to flow into the Animus via the shallow groundwater system? Is the mine tailing underlaid with either clay or other non-permeable barrier to stop metal migration to the river? That's a great question, and that is actually one of their priority sites. They have drilled groundwater monitoring wells. I haven't looked into any of the data they collected at that site yet, but they are drilling a lot of monitoring wells, especially in some of those areas where mine tailings are kind of spread out, to better understand how metal contamination might be moving in the groundwater system. So that is part of the characterization work that they're doing up there. And yeah, we have more questions than answers when it comes to kind of the main stem of the Animus above Silverton. And that is chief among them, is what's going on there. Some of the sites were managed in the past by different mine owners, some of them changing hands. And so what was done to mitigate metal pollution is also hard to tease out. I wouldn't be surprised if some of those sites do have kind of a non-permeable barrier that was put in place. Whether those are still functioning or whether they were adequate to begin with, that's kind of up in the air still. But that's an excellent question, and one that I would welcome you to join during one of the CAG meetings to ask the EPA yourself. If you're not there though, I will follow up on it for you, and always reach out to me, and happy to discuss these things. So further downstream, Gene Reitz asks, what about the water quality watershed impacts of the fires? Excellent question. We saw significant water quality impacts after the 416 fire. For those of you who were here for that event, for years after the 416, which was in 2018, we saw large metal contributions coming off the burn scar, especially during storm events, right? One of the interesting things that I learned from that event about wildfire is it changes the soil chemistry, right? So even natural metals that are caught up in the soil can be released into the system when fire burns at a high enough intensity to change the soil chemistry. And so we saw large contributions of metals coming off the 416 fire, along with just ash and debris. We had about 80% of the fish die in the river below the 416 burn scar. Most fish that I pulled out of the river seemed to have suffocated, right? But we did have toxic levels of metals. I think most of them just suffocated from all the ash and sediment that was in the river system. All the fish that I pulled out just had gills filled with ash. It was really sad to see. Of course, the good news with a kind of wildfire event over something like a mine spill is they are natural. Even though this one wasn't started naturally, wildfires do happen, and we are seeing forest bounce back. We're seeing Hermosa Creek, which is the tributary to the Animus that carried all those metals and sediment into the river system. That is bouncing back. Water quality is improving. And talking to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we're seeing fish return to the river as well. So the river is rebounding. It can take a couple of years after fire events like this. But Mountain Studies Institute, who's doing excellent monitoring of that, would be a great resource if you'd like to learn more. They're doing regular monitoring for water quality related to the 416 fire. So I think that's all of the questions that I had in the chat. Does anybody have a general question or anything else that they want to chat about? It's okay if you don't. Okay, well then I'm going to throw out some things just to see if anybody's interested, because there's things that I've been thinking about a lot recently. I don't know if it's been becoming more as all of you, but climate change is here, right? We're seeing larger wildfires, we're seeing more wildfires, we're seeing warmer temperatures, we're seeing less snowfall. Things that keep me up at night as far as the Animus River system. The really great news for the Animus, and what I kind of consider to be the magic of the Animus, is that it's a free-flowing river, right? We don't have a dam across it. It naturally pulses. It can fill up its own kind of groundwater systems. It's not held back by any kind of dam. And all the science is telling us that makes the river more resilient in the face of climate change, right? Even when we have bad snow years, good snow years and monsoons can help flush things through the system, flush out pollutants, help accommodate pollutants, nutrients, dilute other things. So we do need to worry about climate change, but the Animus is in a good spot, all things considered. One thing that I get worried about is one of the reactions to climate change and to drought especially could be to build new dams, to build new reservoirs, to take more water out of the river, which really does a disservice, I think, to everybody downstream. It damages the ecology of the system. And so that's something that I've been kind of trying to be as loud as I can about, that the solution to climate change is not more dams, it's not draining rivers. It's trying to keep as much water in the system as we can to keep it healthy. So that's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, right? So the Animus is part of the very important Colorado River system that provides water to 40 million plus people in the West. Most of the flow in the San Juan River from time to time comes from the Animus River, since it's one of its biggest tributaries. It's a really important river, and it sits at the head of the system. So keeping it clean, keeping as much water as possible in it, helps everybody downstream, and it helps our own communities along the river itself. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. We did have a call on the Colorado River system. So folks in other states in the West are having to make cuts. It's hitting farmers really hard, especially. Climate change is here, and it's something that we need to talk about more, I think. So that's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and would love to hear if others have any thoughts. And again, it's okay if you don't. You can just tune in to listen to me for these scoops. Okay, last call. I might wrap things up a little bit early here, unless there's anything else folks wanted to talk about. All right, no sweat. Well, my last plug for you guys is to first say thank you to all of our members. We are a member-funded organization, right? So I couldn't be doing this work for membership. None of my coworkers would be here doing the work without your support. So thank you for those of you that are members. If you're not sure about your membership status, you can reach out. We can let you know if you're still a member with us. If you have any friends that would also care about the things that we work on, please connect them with us too. We get about half of all of our funding comes from members like you that support the work that we do. And we really pride ourselves in that too. So if you ever have any questions about that, the email reach out to info@sanjuancitizens.org. You can check your membership status. You can also go to our website. There are ways to donate there. Yeah, again, really appreciate all of you. And never hesitate to reach out with any questions about the Animus. I could talk about it all day or for multiple days. My email is marcel@sanjuancitizens.org. I think Raina might have put it in the chat. No, she didn't. I got it. Marcel@sanjuancitizens.org. Put my email there. Oh, I think I might have sent all of my links to the waiting room. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, let me try that again. Last thing before we go, well, I should have everybody's attention. I sent all of my important links to the waiting room and not to you, and I apologize for that. So I'll give you some time once I do post these to click into them so you have it. There.
My mom kept me in the waiting room for like 36 hours. So, then when she gave labor, she's like, okay, get out of the waiting room.
Oh, Dan, I didn't see you there. Hey, Dan. So yeah, just another quick overview of the links that I put in there. The link to the Bonita Peak Community Advisory Group, our best source of information for the Superfund site. There's a link to that Superfund map that we've been working on, and we'll be providing updates to that map later this year. A link to the San Juan Watershed group, if you want to tune in what's happening for water quality, the Animus in the lower part of the watershed. Go. A link to that E. coli article. If you want to volunteer for bacteria sampling further downstream, you click that, it'll take you to a Google form where you can sign up. There's a link to that ethnographic study that the Utes have just completed this year. Super interesting stuff. And then links to those two events that I mentioned, the one at the Four Corners Water Center at Fort Lewis College and the New Mexico Outdoor Economics Conference. So I'll give folks a little bit of time to click on those, make sure you have them. And yeah, like I said, never hesitate to reach out. We are here to answer any questions when it comes to environmental issues in this neck of the woods. So
cool.
Again, thank all of you so much.
Yeah, toward the end of episode 3, I do have a little piece on other crap in the river. And I have Melissa May's presentation on who pooped in the river. So E. coli is a big deal.
Yes, it is.
Good. Thanks
Yes,
thanks for keeping that up there.
And good shout out for Melissa May. Good shout out for Melissa May with the San Juan Soil and Water Conservation District down in Aztec. She's been a big part of understanding water quality issues in the lower watershed. And then also Alyssa Richmond, who's the coordinator for the San Juan Watershed Group in Farmington. Those two, I can put you in touch with either of them if you have more questions about E. coli or other things in the lower watershed. So yeah, again, thank all of you so much. I'll probably leave it here for a second if folks are still grabbing those links out of the chat, and we will see you guys next month with Mike Eisenfeld, our energy and climate organizer. Yeah, again, thanks all of you. I'm turning off my camera now, but I will leave this up so folks can grab links. Take care.